I started working at Ridgeway High School in upstate New York 3 years ago. It's an old brick building, built sometime in the 1950s, sitting at the edge of a small, quiet town. Most of the classrooms are updated with smart boards and computers now, but the bones of the place still feel ancient: long, echoing hallways, old locker doors that never quite close, and a smell of dust and chalk that never really goes away. My shift runs from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. It's a lonely job, but it pays well and lets me work in peace. I do my rounds every hour, checking doors, classrooms, the gym, and the cafeteria. I keep the security cameras up on my monitor in the main office, and every night is usually the same. Nothing happens, just the sound of the old building settling and the hum of the fluorescent lights. Until that one night in October. It started like any other shift. The autumn wind was sharp, rattling the big glass windows near the entrance. I clocked in at 9:58, poured myself a cup of stale coffee, and did my first round through the east wing. Everything was quiet, too quiet. Usually, the motion sensors picked up a rat or two scurrying along the hallway floors, but that night, the lights didn't flicker once. When I got back to the office around 11:30, I noticed something strange on the security feed. One of the classroom lights on the third floor, room 305, was on. That was odd. I was sure I turned it off during my earlier round. I zoomed in on the feed. The door was open a crack, and inside, I thought I saw movement, just a shadow slipping past the window. At first, I assumed it was a teacher who'd forgotten something, or maybe a student who'd sneaked in. But then I remembered, all the teachers' keys had been collected that week for reissuing, and the building was fully locked down. Nobody should have been there. I grabbed my flashlight and radio and headed upstairs. The stairwell lights buzzed weakly as I climbed, flickering with every step. When I reached the third floor, the hall was pitch dark except for the sliver of light spilling from room 305. The sound of my boots echoed too loudly against the linoleum. "Hello?" I called out. "Security? Anyone up here?" No answer. The door to 305 was half open, the light humming softly. I pushed it open with my flashlight raised. The room was empty. Desks neatly arranged, chairs stacked in pairs on top. But the smart board was on, displaying a static blue screen, as if someone had recently unplugged a computer. And on the board, faintly written in dry erase marker, were the words, "You're late." I froze. It wasn't there before. I'd checked that classroom less than an hour ago. My hand tightened on the flashlight. I checked every corner of the room, even the supply closet. Empty. I erased the words, shut off the lights, and locked the door. When I got back downstairs, I tried to laugh it off. Maybe one of the teachers had pulled a prank, or maybe a student had written that earlier and I'd just missed it. Still, I couldn't shake the unease crawling up my spine. At around 1:12 a.m., another light flicked on, this time, the auditorium. Now, the auditorium's a massive room at the back of the school, with heavy velvet curtains and creaky wooden floors. The building crew had been renovating it since the summer, so it was off-limits to everyone, including me. The feed showed a single stage light burning right over the center of the platform. Something, or someone, was standing there. It wasn't clear at first. The camera was grainy, low quality. But I could make out the faint silhouette of a person, tall, still, facing the empty seats. I blinked, and the shape was gone. That's when the office phone rang. The sound nearly made me jump out of my chair. It was the old landline the school kept connected in case of emergencies, but it hadn't rung once in my entire time working there. I picked it up. Ridgeway High, security desk. Silence. Then a faint, distorted voice whispered through the line, "You shouldn't be here after dark." The line went dead. I stood there staring at the receiver, heart hammering. The caller ID just showed a blank, no number, no location. I tried to call my supervisor, but the cell service inside the building was terrible. My call failed twice. I decided to check the auditorium. I know, it was a stupid idea. But I had to make sure no one had broken in. I'd have been in trouble if something happened on my watch. The hallway leading to the auditorium was colder than the rest of the school, like someone had left a door open. My breath fogged in front of me, even though the heating was still on. As I approached, I heard something faint, the slow creak of a piano key being pressed down. Just one note. Again and again. The door to the auditorium was slightly ajar. Light spilled out onto the hallway floor. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The smell hit me first, old wood and something faintly metallic, like rust or blood. The single spotlight on stage glared down, illuminating the grand piano at the center. Its lid was up, and the keys were moving. Softly. Slowly. As if invisible fingers were pressing them one by one. I froze halfway down the aisle. The key stopped. Then, from somewhere up in the balcony seats, a voice said, softly, clearly, "Don't stop the music, Mr. Dalton." My throat went dry. Nobody had called me by my last name. Not here. I didn't even wear a name tag. I swung my flashlight toward the balcony, but it was empty. The beam of light caught only dust mote swirling in the air. Then the spotlight on the stage flickered and went out. The entire room plunged into darkness. I stumbled backward, heart racing, fumbling for the exit. When I turned to leave, something brushed past my shoulder, a cold gust of air that carried the faint scent of old perfume. I didn't wait to see what it was. I bolted out of the auditorium and slammed the door behind me. Back in the office, I tried to calm down. I told myself maybe it was the heating system, or maybe a short in the lights causing the weirdness. But when I looked back at the security monitor, every single camera feed was static. Everyone, except room 305. The light in that classroom was on again. And there was something sitting at one of the desks. It looked like a student, head down, hands folded neatly. I could only see the top of the head, dark hair hanging forward. The timestamp on the camera feed was frozen at 2:07 a.m., though my clock read 2:21. I watched for a full minute, but the image didn't move. Then, suddenly, the student's head lifted. Two hollow, dark eyes stared straight into the camera. The feed cut out. I don't remember running upstairs, but I did. I just remember the echo of my footsteps and the way the air seemed to get thicker with every step. When I reached room 305, the door was wide open. The light was off. I shone my flashlight inside. The room was completely empty, but every desk had been moved, forming a perfect circle in the center of the floor. In the middle of the circle was a single piece of paper. It was a student attendance sheet. The name at the top was mine. And next to it, written in neat cursive, the words, "Present." I dropped the paper and backed out slowly. My radio crackled to life on my shoulder. Static at first, then the same voice from the phone whispered, "Thank you for staying late." I tore the radio off and threw it down the hallway. At that point, I just wanted to get out. I sprinted down the stairs, through the front lobby, and yanked open the main doors. But they didn't move. The electronic lock was engaged. The system only unlocks automatically at 6 a.m. I was trapped inside. I tried every side exit, nothing. I even tried breaking one of the smaller glass panels near the cafeteria, but the security coating held firm. The lights began flickering in the hallways. At first, it was random, one or two at a time, then a pattern started forming, moving toward me, like something walking down the hall, each light going dark as it passed. I ran. I don't even know where I was going. My flashlight flickered and died. I could hear the soft squeak of shoes on the linoleum behind me, slow, steady, unhurried. I ducked into the nearest classroom and locked the door. My breathing was ragged. I crouched under the teacher's desk and tried to stay silent. The footsteps stopped outside the door. Then came the knock. 3 slow knocks. Then a pause. Then another, lighter, like fingernails. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. After a moment, the handle turned, slowly, but the door didn't open. Then, from inside the classroom, behind me, I heard the sound of a chair scraping against the floor. I spun around. One of the student desks had been pulled out from the row. and written on its top, in fresh black marker, were the words, "Sit down, class isn't over." I bolted out of the room. The lights were off again. The entire school felt alive, the hum of electricity, the groan of the pipes, the faint whispers echoing through the vents. Every sound felt deliberate, like the building was breathing around me. When I finally reached the main office again, all the security monitors were on. Every feed showed the same image, me running through the halls. Except in each one, I wasn't alone. In every frame, a tall figure was walking behind me, sometimes just a shadow, sometimes almost clear, wearing what looked like an old 1970s Ridgeway High uniform. The face was pale, eyes completely black. And then, one by one, each monitor blinked out until only one remained. Room 305. The camera showed the classroom door slowly creaking open. The figure stepped inside. Then it turned, as if it knew I was watching, and walked straight toward the camera. Its face filled the screen, empty eyes, a smile that stretched too wide. The screen went black. At that exact moment, the power in the entire building shut off. I was plunged into silence and darkness. I don't remember much after that, only that I must have passed out or lost track of time. When I opened my eyes again, sunlight was streaming through the windows. The morning janitor was shaking me awake in the hallway near the main office. He said he'd found me sitting against the wall, mumbling something about attendance. When I checked the office monitors, everything was normal. No recordings from the night before. The system had rebooted at 5:59 a.m., wiping all data like it does every week. I quit that same day. But last week, I got a call from a friend who still works there. He said the new night guard's been hearing things lately, footsteps, whispers, a piano playing faintly around 2 a.m. And when he checked the logs for room 305, he found something strange. Under authorized personnel, my name had reappeared, even though my ID was deactivated months ago. My name's Ethan Cole. I was 16 when my mom moved us to a small town in Pennsylvania called Harriston, one of those quiet, woodsy towns where everyone seems to know each other and the high school looks like it's been standing there since the Civil War. We'd just moved from Chicago after my dad passed away. Mom said she needed a fresh start. I didn't argue, but I wasn't thrilled about being the new kid halfway through junior year. The first morning of school, the air was cold, foggy. Harriston High stood at the edge of town, surrounded by trees that looked almost black against the grey sky. The building itself was huge, old red brick, tall windows, a clock tower that didn't seem to work anymore. When I walked up to the front doors, I noticed something strange. One of the windows above the entrance had a crack running through it, like a spider web. And for just a second, I thought I saw someone standing there, a shadow, pale and still, looking down at me. Then I blinked, and it was gone. Inside, the hallways were crowded with students. Lockers slamming, sneakers squeaking on tile floors, teachers shouting directions. The usual chaos. But underneath the noise, there was something else, a weird tension in the air, like the whole building was holding its breath. My first class was history with Mr. Hargrove. When I walked in, everyone stopped talking for a second, typical new kid treatment. The teacher gave me a polite smile, handed me a textbook, and told me to take a seat in the back. As I sat down, the girl next to me leaned over. "You're new, right?" "Yeah," I said. "Ethan." "I'm Riley." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You got stuck with this class first period?" "Rough luck." I laughed awkwardly. "Why's that?" She didn't answer right away. Then, in a low voice, she said, "You'll see." Class went on as usual. Mr. Hargrove lectured about post-war America, and I tried to stay awake. But about halfway through, the lights flickered. Everyone looked up. It wasn't just a quick blink, they flickered on and off 3 times, in a slow rhythm, before settling again. Mr. Hargrove sighed. "Old wiring," he muttered. "This place is 100 years old." But Riley leaned closer to me. "It's not the wiring," she whispered. "It's him." I gave her a puzzled look. "Who?" She didn't respond, just stared at the back of the classroom, where the door to the storage closet stood slightly ajar. After class, I asked her again what she meant. She just shook her head. "Forget it. Just don't go near that room." The rest of the day was fine, boring, normal. I met a few other kids, got lost twice, ate lunch alone. By last period, I'd almost convinced myself that Riley was just messing with me. Then the fire alarm went off. It wasn't the usual blaring alarm, more like a long, distorted tone that echoed weirdly through the halls. Everyone froze. Then the intercom crackled to life. A voice, low, hoarse, said, "Remain in your classrooms." Teachers looked confused. One of them said the principal hadn't planned a drill. We stayed put. Minutes passed. The hallway lights dimmed slightly, and the sound of the alarm faded into silence. I glanced toward the door and realized something. The air outside was moving, like a faint ripple of heat. Then the doorknob turned, slowly. Everyone gasped. Mr. Hargrove stood up. "Who's out there?" he called. No answer. He walked to the door, opened it, and the hallway was empty. At least, that's what I thought until I noticed the faint trail of wet footprints leading away, small ones, barefoot, like a child's. That's when Riley whispered, "It's starting again." After school ended, I tried to ask her about it, but she bolted out the door before I could catch up. I walked home alone through the cold fog, replaying everything in my head, the flickering lights, the footprints, the weird voice. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., I heard something faint, a scraping sound, like fingernails dragging across glass. I sat up and saw the window above my desk fogged up from the cold. And written in the condensation were 2 words, "Come back." I didn't sleep after that. The next morning, I told myself it was just my imagination. Maybe it had been written from the outside by condensation patterns, whatever. But when I got to school, I noticed everyone seemed tense. Kids were whispering, glancing over their shoulders. During homeroom, the principal came on the intercom. His voice sounded shaky. "Students, please stay calm. There's no cause for alarm, but some areas of the building will be closed today for maintenance." Whispers erupted. Riley turned in her seat and mouthed, "Room 212. That was our history class. When I got there, the door was taped off with yellow maintenance tape. Mr. Hargrove stood nearby, talking quietly to another teacher. I caught a glimpse inside. The desks had been pushed aside, and there was a dark stain spreading across the floor. It looked like water at first. But it wasn't. Later that day, Riley found me at lunch. "You saw it, didn't you?" "Yeah," I said. "What happened?" She hesitated, then leaned in. "You're not going to believe me. But there's something wrong with this school. It started before I was born. Before most of the teachers were even here." She told me about a student named Caleb Moore, a boy who went missing back in 1985. He was quiet, shy, always reading alone. One day he was sent to the storage room during detention to clean old desks. He never came out. At first, people thought he'd run away. But then the strange stuff started, flickering lights, voices over the intercom, footsteps in empty hallways. And sometimes, students claimed they saw him, a pale kid with wet hair, standing just beyond the classroom doors. The room he vanished from. Riley said, "It's right behind our history class. Room 212. I tried to laugh it off, but she wasn't smiling. That night, curiosity got the better of me. I stayed late after basketball tryouts, waited until the halls were empty, and slipped upstairs. The tape across room 212 was gone. The hallway lights flickered, and the air felt colder the closer I got. I pushed open the door. The smell hit me first, mold, dust, and something else, metallic and sharp. The classroom was dark except for a faint blue glow from the smartboard. Desks were scattered around like someone had moved them in a hurry. The storage closet door was open. I hesitated, then stepped inside. The closet was small, shelves stacked with old textbooks, chairs, and broken equipment. But at the back, half hidden under a top, was a mirror. It wasn't cracked or dirty. It looked new. Too new. And for a second, my reflection didn't move. I froze. I lifted my hand. My reflection stayed still. Then, slowly, it raised its hand, a beat too late, and smiled. I stumbled backward, my flashlight shaking. The reflection stepped closer, its face pale and wet-looking, eyes completely black. I turned and ran out of the room. When I looked back, the door was closed again. The next morning, the principal announced over the intercom that the East Wing would be temporarily closed for renovations. No explanation. Riley caught up to me between classes. "You went there, didn't you?" she said. I nodded. "There's a mirror in that room. Something's wrong with it." She paled. "They found it last year, after a pipe burst. They say it wasn't there before, like it appeared overnight. Every time someone looks into it too long, things start happening." "What kind of things?" I asked. She swallowed. "People disappear. That night, I tried to tell my mom everything. She brushed it off as stress. Said new schools were hard, that I was probably dreaming. But the next morning, when I looked in the bathroom mirror, there was condensation again, even though the air was cold and dry. And written across it, in smeared letters, "See you soon." I refused to go back to school the next day, but Mom made me. Said I couldn't skip just because of a nightmare. When I got there, the halls were quiet. Too quiet. The lights were dimmer than usual, and there were fewer kids around. Riley wasn't at her locker. Mr. Hargrove wasn't in class. The intercom crackled again. "Ethan Cole, please report to room 212. My blood ran cold. I stood frozen while everyone else stared at me. "Go on," someone said. "They called you." I walked through the silent halls. When I reached the East Wing, the door to room 212 was wide open, though it was supposed to be sealed. The mirror was still there, standing upright in the center of the room now. My reflection looked wrong, pale, blurred, like it was underwater. I stepped closer. The reflection smiled. Then it reached out, and I swear I saw the surface ripple, like water disturbed by a drop. Something pulled at my chest. I stumbled back, but my reflection didn't mimic me. It stepped forward, pressing its hand against the inside of the glass. I ran. I didn't stop until I was outside, gasping for air. The principal and a few teachers were standing near the entrance, looking confused. I tried to explain, but when I looked back through the front doors, the hallway behind me was empty. No mirror. No room. Just brick wall. They said there was no room 212. That the old East Wing had been closed and rebuilt years ago after a fire. I swore I'd been there. I told them about the mirror, the voice, everything. They just exchanged worried looks. The principal told my mom I might be adjusting poorly. But that night, as I was lying in bed, I got a text. It was from a number I didn't recognize. No profile picture. It said, "You're late, Ethan." Then another, "Class starts soon." My phone buzzed again, this time a photo. It was me. Sitting at a desk. In room 212. Only I wasn't alone. A pale boy with black eyes sat behind me, smiling. The next morning, my mom found my phone on the floor beside my bed. The police came, searched the woods, checked every camera in the area. They found nothing. No one ever saw me again. But sometimes, students at Harriston High say they hear footsteps down the East Wing late at night. The lights flicker, and the intercom crackles to life. The library at Hollow Creek High School was the oldest part of the entire campus. Everything else had been modernized, bright white hallways, polished linoleum floors, security cameras on every corner, and a glass-walled cafeteria filled with sunlight. But the library was different. It had survived every renovation, every storm, and every budget cut. Its dark oak shelves, warped wooden floorboards, and the faint, ever-present scent of dust and paper made it feel like a time capsule from another world. Students often said that the library wasn't really part of Hollow Creek High at all. According to old records, it had been inherited from Hollow Creek Academy, a private boarding school that stood there long before the high school was built. The academy had closed after a fire in 1953 that took the lives of 19 students. When the new high school opened in the 70s, the surviving west wing of the old academy had been rebuilt into the library. Teachers avoided talking about it, but everyone in town knew the story. Still, the strangest rumor of all was about the last shelf, the one tucked away in the farthest corner of the back wall, half hidden by shadows and a sagging curtain. There was a small metal chain stretched across it and a faded paper sign that read, in crooked handwriting, "Restricted. Do not open." Nobody ever questioned it too seriously. The students assumed it was just old or damaged books. Mrs. Harrow, the librarian, never allowed anyone near it. She wasn't cruel, just firm. If someone asked, she would simply smile tightly and say, "That section isn't for students." And that was the end of the conversation. For decades, the rule went unquestioned. Until 3 students decided to break it. Ethan Carter, Liam Brooks, and Chloe Rivera were juniors, friends since middle school, though friends might have been generous. Ethan was the instigator of almost every bit of trouble they got into. Smart but restless, he hated rules that didn't have reasons. Liam was quieter, the voice of reason who often got dragged along because he didn't like saying no. Chloe, the yearbook photographer, liked stories that sounded like they belonged in a movie. She had a habit of treating every mystery like an adventure waiting to be documented. It was a rainy Friday in October when the idea came up. The storm had been relentless all day, and lunch period was cancelled due to lightning. Students were told to stay indoors. The 3 of them ended up in the library, sitting at a corner table where the light flickered slightly with each rumble of thunder. Chloe had been flipping through an old school yearbook, one from the early 50s that Mrs. Harrow kept in a display case. She pointed at a faded black and white photo of a girl smiling in a checkered dress. The caption read, "Margaret Hale, Class of 1953. Chloe whispered that her older sister had told her a story about the fire, how Margaret Hale was the only student marked present in the attendance records after the tragedy. All the others were listed as missing or deceased. Ethan grinned, intrigued. A mystery. A name. A forbidden part of the library. He said they should see if that shelf really held old records. Liam tried to laugh it off, but he couldn't hide the nervous glance he cast toward the dark back corner. The rain hammered harder against the windows. The lights flickered again, and Mrs. Harrow, sitting at her desk near the entrance, didn't even seem to notice. She just typed away quietly, the rhythmic click of her keys the only steady sound in the room. By the end of the school day, the plan was set. The 3 would come back after hours. No teachers, no librarians, just them and the mystery of the last shelf. When the final bell rang, they pretended to leave with everyone else, then doubled back. Ethan knew the side door's latch never closed properly. They slipped in around 6, long after the custodians had left. The storm was still raging outside, wind howling through the eaves, the sky flashing white every few seconds. The library was darker than they expected. Only a few emergency lights cast dim orange pools across the floor. Their footsteps echoed as they crept between the rows of shelves. Dust drifted in the air, glowing faintly in the light of their phone flashlights. Liam hesitated. He whispered that maybe they should wait until Monday, maybe ask Mrs. Harrow directly. Ethan ignored him and kept walking. The air grew colder as they moved toward the back. The floor creaked beneath their sneakers. At last, they stood before the final shelf. It leaned slightly to one side, its wooden edges rough and splintered with age. The chain hung loosely across the middle, the restricted sign half torn. Ethan ran his hand over it. The wood was cold, unnaturally so, like touching metal in winter. He unhooked the chain and dropped it to the floor. Behind the first row of dusty books, he noticed something unusual. The books didn't have titles, just numbers etched into their spines. He pulled one out. The cover read, in fading gold letters, Hollow Creek Academy, attendance 1953. He opened it carefully. The pages were yellowed and brittle, filled with neat handwriting. A list of names, each marked with a check mark next to the word present. Every line had been crossed out in thick black ink, except the last one. Margaret Hale, present. Chloe leaned closer, her voice barely a whisper. She said that was the same name from the yearbook photo. Liam muttered that it was probably just coincidence. Then, before they could say another word, the lights went out. Everything was silent for a moment except the rain outside. Then came a faint sound, like pages turning in the dark. Ethan lifted his phone to look around. The beam shook in his hand. Chloe's flashlight caught the edge of the shelf, and for a split second, they saw something move behind it. A whisper floated through the air, barely audible. It was soft, like breath against their ears. Liam froze. Chloe's eyes went wide. The whisper came again, closer this time. The books began to tremble, one by one. Dust fell like ash from the shelves. A single book slid out and dropped to the floor. Then another. Then all at once, they began to fly outward, scattering across the room. Ethan picked up the attendance book again, his hands trembling. A new line of ink was appearing beneath Margaret Hale's name. His breath caught. He dropped the book. Liam grabbed his arm, shouting that they had to go. But the whisper was growing louder now, overlapping, multiplying, voices of dozens of students all murmuring the same word. Present. 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 They ran for the exit. The door was only a few feet away, but when Ethan grabbed the handle, it wouldn't move. It felt locked, though he'd left it open. The metal was ice cold, burning his skin. He yanked harder. Nothing. The library fell silent again. Then came a deep, creaking sound from behind them. The last shelf had shifted forward, scraping against the floor. Behind it, a thin sliver of light glowed through a crack in the wall. Ethan turned slowly. He could see what looked like a narrow passage hidden behind the shelf. He stepped toward it before the others could stop him and pushed the shelf aside. A rush of cold air swept out, carrying the faint scent of smoke and something older, something burnt and forgotten. Beyond the crack was a small room, its walls blackened by soot. A single desk sat in the center, covered in ashes and half-melted candles. On the far wall, written in faded red paint, were the words, "All students must be accounted for." The air was so cold that their breath came out in visible clouds. Ethan's flashlight flickered. On the desk lay another attendance sheet, charred around the edges. He picked it up carefully. Every name was marked present, but the last few had been crossed out violently, gouged through with what looked like fingernails instead of ink. Liam whispered that they needed to leave, but before they could move, a soft sob broke the silence. From the corner of the room, a figure emerged, a girl in a burn school uniform. Her skin was pale and cracked, her hair hanging in clumps over her face. Smoke curled faintly around her shoulders. Her eyes were hollow, black pits that seemed to swallow the light. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "You're late for roll call." Chloe screamed. Ethan stumbled back. The door they'd come through slammed shut. The girl tilted her head. "You weren't here before," she said. "Now you are." The attendance book on the desk snapped open by itself. The pages flipped rapidly until the pen marks began to move again, forming new names. Liam Brooks, present. Chloe Rivera, present. Ethan shouted for it to stop, but the girl just stared at him. "You came when you weren't called," she whispered. Her voice echoed as if more than one person were speaking at once. Ethan grabbed a candle from the desk and threw it. The wax splattered across the wall, but the flame reignited midair and crawled upward. The girl's cracked lips curved into a faint smile. "Fire doesn't hurt me anymore." Flames erupted along the walls. Smoke filled the tiny room. Chloe coughed, stumbling toward the far end where she spotted a small, boarded-up window. Ethan smashed it open with a chair. Rain poured in, the wind howling through the gap. Chloe climbed first, cutting her hands on the glass. Liam followed, dragging himself through. Ethan was last, but as he pulled himself up, something gripped his ankle. The girl's cold fingers wrapped around him. Her empty eyes stared up. "You can't leave," she whispered. "You're on the list now." Ethan kicked wildly, screaming. Liam reached through the window, grabbed his arm, and pulled with all his strength. With one final wrench, Ethan broke free. The three of them fell out into the mud and the rain. When they looked back through the shattered window, the fire was gone. The room was dark. The shelf looked untouched. They ran until the school was a blur behind them. None of them spoke on the way home. The next morning, the principal didn't believe a word of their story. The library was fine, no burn marks, no broken window, no fallen books. When they tried to show the attendance records, the shelf was full of ordinary textbooks. Mrs. Harrow was calm but pale when she called them into her office. Her voice shook as she said, "You opened it, didn't you?" Ethan nodded slowly. She told them the truth. Margaret Hale had been a student the night the academy burned down. She wasn't in her seat during evening roll call, and she was the only one who survived. When they found the attendance book in the ashes, every name had been marked present except hers. For years, the staff believed her spirit lingered, still trying to finish attendance. That was why the shelf was sealed, the books hidden, so no one would disturb her routine. Chloe whispered, "So she stayed?" Mrs. Harrow's eyes filled with tears. She stayed to finish roll call. After that day, things changed. Chloe stopped coming to the library altogether. Liam transferred schools at semester break. Ethan tried to act like nothing had happened, but he started having dreams, always the same one. He'd hear the whisper behind him, soft and slow. "Present." He'd wake up drenched in sweat, his phone alarm showing 3:33 a.m. every time. 3 weeks later, Chloe didn't show up to class. Her locker was open. Her backpack sat untouched. No one saw her leave. When Ethan went to the library that afternoon, the restricted sign was gone. In its place was a new one, "Do not disturb during roll call." On the librarian's desk sat the old attendance book, perfectly clean. Only one fresh name was written on the page. Chloe Rivera, present. Beneath it, a blank line waited, the pen resting beside it. Ethan Carter, he didn't stay long enough to see it finish. Now, years later, Hollow Creek High has been renovated again. The library is bright and modern, with glass walls and touchscreen computers. Students love the new look, but in the far corner, there's still one untouched section, a single old shelf with no catalog number. Sometimes, during morning roll call, a student might swear they hear something from that direction. A faint scratching sound, like a pen moving across paper. And if they linger a moment too long, they'll feel a chill brush against their ear and a soft, calm voice whisper one word.